sitting in the Creuse at my little table at the back of the house. Been doing a lot of painting recently, as I'll show you now. And when I do work, I work at quite a pace, as you can see around me now. Just a few pieces in the last few days over here in France, getting ready for an exhibition. So you see I produce work very quickly, and a great variety of work as well. In this case I'm concentrating mainly on acrylics, but my channel shows you all sorts of different work, from wood carving to watercolours to pastels to acrylics to oils to gold leafing, multimedia, even resin work. So I'm going to do one watercolour painting of a Creuse scene here where the streamer weed is coming into flower. But as you'll see on my channel, there are many ways of working. There are so many ways that we can make a painting work. There are so many ways of producing a painting, and we want to choose the best medium and method, I think, for the subject, which is what I like to do, have total freedom with all of the mediums. In this case I'm just going to show you a watercolour, but not just a watercolour. I'm going to show you several ways that we can approach this watercolour, several ways we can use different techniques in a watercolour of a river here to give the effects that we want. For instance, with the streamer weed we can use masking fluid, we can use splatter, we can use pointillist technique. There are so many different ways that we can work. I'm going to show you some of those ways before we even start the painting, then I will choose the ones I want to use for the complete painting as we go along, and I'll show you that step by step. This will just give you another idea. The biggest thing about life is adventure. An adventure is a risk. You cannot have an adventure without taking risks. And what are you going to risk in art? A little bit of paint, a canvas, a few bits of watercolour paper. But if you risk and try something new and it does work, then you're going to step forward and have great fun and have great adventures and great times and produce much better work. Sometimes it's going to fail, sometimes it's not. Especially in watercolour, because as many of you know, you need to loosen up into watercolour really to make it work. You need to get flowing with it, as I have been with these acrylic paintings of mine. Also, a great variety of work, as I was saying. Let me just show you now a few examples of my different types of work for different purposes. Now here you see me using all of these different mediums for totally different effects, and it's great fun. So I do hope that you'll come across to my channel and enjoy many of my films too. As I say, there's about 600, so it'll keep you occupied for a good long while. Without explaining anything further, let's get straight on with this watercolour demonstration and show you different ways that we can use watercolour, simple watercolour techniques to produce this river scene in flower. Just look at that view, isn't that beautiful? Okay, let's draw out this painting and actually get on with it then. Let's start with a few drawing tips. I've marked out my photograph into quarters and eighths. I've marked out the edge of the masking tape here. I haven't stretched this paper, it's not necessary for heavy watercolour paper like this. Just put masking tape all the way around the outside. Don't just do the corners, do go all the way around. So I haven't got my quarters and eighths. Whatever comes here on here comes here within that mark there, and so on here. So what I'm doing is finding the most important shapes. We can work a loose painting within a fairly tight drawing, but if we start painting a loose painting within a looser drawing, it tends to enhance the faults in the drawing. So for most of us, unless you're very, very good, it's wiser to get your drawing as correctly as possible before you start off, just marking in one point to another compared to the quarters and eighths that you've got. So for instance, I've got the reeds here, I've got a quarter there, in between quarter and that here, this water, this lump of white flowers and marshy stuff comes around here, that curls through here, coming into there to a quarter between here and halfway between there and there. There's this curve here of this weed that comes right up and curves out from there to a lovely sort of arc, just so I know where my lights are going to be, because I've got to put the masking fluid into this next. So I'm going to continue my whole drawing like that and just get it finished off. Right, it's now time to add the masking fluid to this. We've got all these lovely white areas, dot 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 dot, and that's easy enough to do with this one, but when it comes to those very fine areas in the back, now if I wanted to I could use even two techniques together. We could take the white gouache and use a toothbrush to splatter it on. But what I'm going to actually do today is experiment a little. I'm going to use a sponge. It's one of my favourite sponges, so I don't want to mess it up, with the masking fluid and wash it off quickly before it has time to really clog up the sponge. So we could use the white gouache and we could splatter it. To start off though, just putting it on with the tip of this little bit of stick. Got to work out where it's all going to go. We've got little bits coming up. I want to be quite careful. I mean, they're quite succinctly placed. Remember that this painting is yours. You are the boss, you are king, you are God, if you like. Sounds a bit blasphemous, but you can change things as you want. But don't not do something or do it incorrectly just because you can't do it right. If you change things, make sure it's a change because you want it. Constable would move his trees maybe 30 yards to the left or right. In the Haywain, for instance, and so on, those places still exist. Many of the trees are still there, and if you compare, I'm sure he could do it if he wanted to, if you compare the painting to the actual place and photographs of it now, you'll notice that the composition has been changed in reality. So we need to start loose and finish tighter, and that way you can finish whenever you want. And I call it my jigsaw way of working. I tend to paint an effect of light first with watercolour, and then gradually tighten up. But usually with my acrylics and oils, I tend to paint shapes one to another all over the picture, so that I'm painting the right colours in the right places, in the right tones and so on, in relation to one another all the way across. The right shapes, the right colours in the right places, and the right shapes relevant one to another. And if you remember that rule, very complicated paintings can very soon become very easy ones. Doesn't matter what you're painting, whether it's horses or people. If you get those shapes right and you paint them right, relevant one to another, then it doesn't matter what they are because they'll turn out correctly. And even right up to these little bits of light in the railings here, I'm going to indicate those as well. Let's take my little sponge here, come back up into here, and we'll start texturing. Now when you're doing texturing with a sponge, make sure that you don't keep doing the same patterns over and over again. In other words, use the sponge, twist the sponge around a bit. Okay, we'll stop at that and get ready to paint. Let that dry off. Well, to start off with, I'll just use a few brushes. I've got my rake on the right, a rigger, my oval mop and a small round brush, and we'll make a start with those. We may not even need any more than that. My masking fluid is now dry, so we'll start with the lightest areas. Which paint shall I use? Well, I think I'll use a bit of both today for fun. I've got a beautiful turquoise here I want to use. Now what I should have done is just put a little bit of water on each of these to start with, because these paints will be solid, they will have dried, and you don't want to be scrubbing. So just pop round with your brush, just drop a little bit of water onto each one, just touch the surfaces. It won't come off in your brush straight away. And we're ready. Now I've got aureolin yellow there, and I've got lemon yellow there. I prefer the aureolin. I've got another new yellow there as well I might try out today. And the same on these. These are already slightly damp, so it's not so bad. Just take a little bit of that turquoise into here. It's a beautiful colour, that turquoise. Right, we'll put a little bit of that down here straight away, thinly. I'm going to paint wet into wet here. I'm not going to paint wet onto water this time. I'm just going to paint wet next to wet for my sky here for the moment. So quite thinly and softly. And I'll put a little bit of my cobalt violet. This is another colour that you cannot make, so these colours are colours that we have to buy in ready-made. I'm just going to drop that cobalt violet in. Wet next to wet in this case. That gives me that lovely light turquoisey pink sky. A bit of hair on there, let's get that off from there. Then a little bit more warmth, so I'm going to take a touch of cobalt blue, so it's a little bit warmer. And just drop that in at the top edge here and let it slide down. I want plenty of colour in my painting. You could do this painting so many different ways, as I was saying. And I've got the paper on a tilt, so the paint's going to just trickle down slightly and give me a fairy effect. So I've got my warm and cool blues. Now these are colour hues. Every colour has a warm and cool. And this is my cool blue and this is my warm blue. Ultramarine would be even warmer still. I'm going to gently bring that right down to here. Remember that the watercolour is going to dry lighter than when you put it on. So that's all going to just blend in softly there, one into another. I've come right over the tree here, it doesn't matter, so it shows through. Bring those down to the water, because whatever's up here is going to reflect down here. I'm going to take a bit more of my beautiful turquoise and drop that in underneath the bridge here. I don't need to do dry brush work yet because I do want to get the whites against the blue, so I want to drop in thin layers at the moment of these pale blues so that the whites will show through later. I'll do a bit of dry brush work as well. And I want to come back to that slightly warmer blue, which is my cobalt, and I'm going to start dropping that in down here. Got a lot of white paper at the moment, so it's going to look very pale. I also want to drop in some of that cobalt violet in just a moment as well. While it's still wet, start to get these effects of ripples going on. Right, now back to the cobalt violet. So it's this one. A bit of pink in other words. It's a very, very light, delicate colour. Just going to drop that in here. Bring it right down through there and into here, so that it blends wet next to the wet there. And I'm leaving that deliberately there because that's where the weed's going to be in just a moment, and I'm going to start bringing in this pink down to here. Make it a little bit stronger. Now we can use the paint thinly, or we can use a bit more pigment in it, and I'm going to start bringing a bit more pigment. Tip of my brush, just tip of my brush here, bringing out where the weeds are, right the way down to there, through here, into there, through here. And again I want slightly stronger colour here now, all the way down here. Slightly stronger. I'm going to blend more colour into there in just a moment. Now back to my cobalt again. I'm going to add a little bit of ultramarine now. We could just stay with the cobalt, but I want to go slightly warmer here now. And we'll start to play wet into wet effects for the water. Start bringing that water just through there lightly, little ripples, look. So that's got that effect going there, and that slightly stronger blue again. Want to come back up here and into this while it's still damp. We'll just drag that slightly stronger blue up into here. Use some water now on my brush. Clean my brush with water, and with a damp brush just blend in these edges here. Let's start on these greens before we come to doing the warm colours here that I want to link in. Having said that, I want a little bit of warmth going in there. Now I'm going to take some raw sienna, which is nicer than yellow ochre, and I just want to drop some of that warmth into this a little bit here. I'm just going to tickle it in with the tip of the brush as if it's little bits of ripples coming through. And again, whilst I've got it on my brush, I'm going to come all the way down to here, give us this thin layer of it, thin wash just starting off into here, right through there. I'm going to go stronger with this later and you'll see how and why. Now I've put a thin wash on there first, as you can see, and I'm going back in now with a slightly heavier drop of the colour to drop it in. Let's start on, to paint this very, very quickly. It's quite a quick study. I mean, I'm used to painting out of doors, so I have to catch the light in a matter of minutes. So it won't take us long to do this painting. Right, I've got some very, very light yellow greens. Now we can mix our greens in the palette, or we can mix them on the paper. I'm going to take a little bit of the Oriole yellow for the moment and just show you how it mixes on the paper. It's rather a nice way to do it. So rather than mix my green beforehand, I'm going to drop in some yellows here now. And let those paints from above drop into it. And the same down here. We've got that yellow coming in here. As I say, you'll see why when I start to put the greens into it. I'm going to put some of that yellow down into here amongst these reeds so that they show yellow later. Right up into here as well. There we go. And already we're getting a coherence as one colour comes into another colour. That's what we want. Now if I were to take some cerulean blue now, or the turquoise, it doesn't really matter. If I start to add that into this, it will tint the, so I'm using both the turquoise and the turquoise is a little bit too acid, but I'm just going to use a bit of it in here. It will turn that yellow into a green. So rather than actually using a green, I'm using my blues, the turquoise or whichever, to get the effect of. Now we've got to control this. Watercolour is called controlled accident, so I've got to control the amount of flow. I'm going to lose my yellows totally. I don't want to lose my yellows totally. I'm going to start coming through there with these little ripples now. The lovely effects we get. And I'm bringing that stream of weed using the tip of my brush. This is the versatility of the oval mops or any filbert brush. A filbert is a rounded end but flat, because a filbert brush allows you to paint heavily one way and thinly the other. Let's start to use a little bit of green. I'm going to take a little bit of sap green now and still use some turquoise with it. And I'm making the paint a little bit heavy. I'm still letting the watercolour paper do the work. I'm letting it just gently spread as it dries. I'm letting it gently spread down and in. I'm going to paint a lot darker in between these shortly. If I want hard edges, I've got to wait for it to dry completely, but I don't want hard edges yet. Verticals. Now water, normally with shiny water, with mirrored water, we paint the verticals first and then the horizontals afterwards. A bit more difficult in watercolour because you've got to leave the lights behind. What are called lost and found edges. That's the edges that are sharp one minute and then they go soft the next. We had this shadow coming down here, which was important as well, and I still want to work into here, soft edged, whilst the paint's still just wet enough to work into. Just getting these effects. Now this is a glaze over the earlier washes, so I'm now painting dark over lighter areas to gradually build this up here, get the feeling of. You can see I can use the tip of the brush to start to make these reeds without even using a small round brush or a rigger. I can get a lot done with the oval mop. I really do love it gradually dry. Now let's look at these trees. We've got a lovely big dark area here and lighter areas there, and I want to do that mixing on the of the greens on the paper again. So I'm going to take my oil in yellow and whack it right through here, all in one go. These are my warmer greens because they're closer to me. I'll go cooler into the background. I'm going to go right down to there. That's going to go through the bridge. You want a united feeling. Taking my turquoise still and now coming back into this yellow. We'll do the same as we did with the river, but I'm going to leave some light areas. Just lift out a little bit of that there, and I'm using the brush, drying the brush to suck out some of my paint here and there. Then I'm going to go back into there deliberately with a bit of that yellow to make it sunny again. Leaving those lights behind. This is nice furry effects. This is just getting wet into wet effects. Just going to block in, gently tickle in, tickle with the edge of the brush, so we get the effect of trees happening there. I don't want to go into detail, I just want the effects of the trees softly in the background, and it's a much cooler hue, this tree here. I'm using all these various greens and tints of blues to get my effects. And those shadows down behind there as well. Gradually, gently pulling it out of the paper and building it up gently. These trees, tree effects. And now it's getting drier, I'm starting to get more texture. So I've got to work fairly quickly now. I'm painting in the darks, I'm painting in all the negative shapes, right up into here and all the way down through here. Now this is where I can start to use another brush. What I'm going to do now is just take my rake brush and use the same colour on it I'm going to drag that colour out whilst the paint is still wet. I'm going to start working that into textures here to start making just the tip of it, start making the tree textures more. Now I can use the tip of this brush to do it as well, like little strokes like that. I can use them both if it comes to it, but it gives you smashing textures. I can use that brush sideways, and this is the rake brush, remember, so I'm just using it sideways here now to work out some of these darks with the edge of the brush. I can use the tip of the other brush or this one. While the brush is in your hand, you might as well use it. And these will enhance the work you're doing with other teachers and other artists. We're not here to say this is the way. I'm here to say this is another way. This is to add to what you're doing. This is to add to what they're teaching you. Same here, we'll just soften that down a bit so that this comes forward more. Otherwise this is going to be distracting from this area here. I'd have to do a lot more before I can remove the masking fluid and really start to work in more detail to get the reflections of the water and so on. So twist the sponge, don't let the sponge stay the same. How different this picture to the acrylic one I did. Totally different techniques of working lights to darks, whereas the other one I was working darks to lights. Building up and building up so that it remains translucent. Those leaves out a bit there, and those leaves will play against there. I do hope you're enjoying this. As I say, I just love painting. I mean, when I demonstrate for workshops and things, it's hard to get me off because I'm just enjoying doing my painting. Why do I want to stop for to talk to you lot? No, I love teaching anyway, but I'm going to start doing a few ripples with the tip of my brush. Some of these darks now. You see that the paint is going on hard edge now. Because it's dried, I'm able to come into here and paint these ripples much more strongly to really get the effect of this water coming out here right through and into these dark areas. Right, need to let that dry because I want to take off the masking fluid now and be able to start on the textures. Right, time now to take away the masking fluid, and as I say, with this particular one I've had no problems, and as you can see it's coming away. If you want more white on it, then obviously we would have to use something like the gouache now to do that. But let's take all of this masking fluid off now. First thing I'm going to do is just take some clean water and soften down these bright areas here. Just take them right back by using the existing paint. I'm going to go back in with a bigger brush in just a moment and put in some more of these darks much more strongly. And again we can use the brush sideways to put some of these dark areas back in as we're doing this texturing as well. And I can start to put a little bit of perspective in with some of these flowing lines. We can draw the weed towards us like that. I'm going to take a bit of ultramarine now, almost pure. Just add that down into here amongst these warms to make the warms warmer and the cool seem cooler. Give me some lovely shadows as well here, and just to also play a bit more amongst these ripples with that. Right, back to here again, and again I'm going to make some stronger grasses there now that I can use the tip of the brush for this. I can use a rigger as well in a minute, but I can probably get away mainly with this brush. And just put in some dark bits here and there. You can see where I've got those reeds there. And this picture to me is almost there now. What I'm going to do now is I might use a little bit of gouache just for fun, just to show you what would happen, but I want to try and lift out a couple more of these. I'm going to use a clean brush, just wet the brush and just lift out a little bit more on these reflections, these ripples coming in here. In between the darks, just to get these highlights a bit better, just to give that a little bit extra sparkle, So into my tube of white, just get some on the tip. I just want to add back in some bits of sparkle here and there that I've lost in glazing. And what do you think? Fun? Have a go at it yourself? Yeah, well do that, and please come and enjoy a lot of the films I've got on my channel where I'm painting for you all over the world, and hopefully you'll enjoy and we'll all become pals, and I hope some of my followers will go and see the other channel and equally enjoy working from and in the ways that they're shown there. There we go then. Just give that a signature for the hell of it. And we'll make a mount for that later, and hopefully it will sell locally. Right. There we are then, little demo for you. Pure watercolour, a little bit of gouache at the end just for fun. Another technique, a fairly figurative one. A little bit of looseness there to start off with, effects of light, and then gradually tightening up at the end. So it's been lovely demonstrating for you, and I hope you'll come and see the rest of my films another time.